The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, commonly known as the Soviet Union, was a socialist superpower that existed until 1991. From 1922 to 1991, this country was composed of 15 republics centered around Russia, spanning a vast territory from Eastern Europe to Northern Asia. The Soviet government nationalized nearly everything, controlling jobs, money, and resources, with the goal of distributing them equally among its citizens under the banner of socialism. Additionally, the Soviet Union sought to eliminate the cultures and values of capitalist nations entirely. Because of this, people living in the Soviet Union were subjected to numerous restrictions and had their freedoms taken away. How did people live in such a country? Born nearly 100 years ago and collapsing 69 years later, the Soviet Union was a massive socialist state. In this historical journey, let's take a closer look at the daily lives of the people who lived in this nation. It was nothing like the casual experience we have today, where we can simply put whatever we like into a basket at the supermarket. Even just going shopping was an incredibly difficult task. Shoppers couldn't freely pick up items in the store. All the products were kept behind the counter, and customers had to call a clerk to retrieve and show them what they wanted. Once they decided what to buy, they had to take an order slip for the item, stand in line at the cash register, and pay. After paying, they had to take the receipt, line up at the counter again, and finally receive their goods. It was an exhausting and frustrating process. Even routine grocery shopping was like this, and obtaining basic items like bread or cheese was a struggle. What's more, in the Soviet Union, food shortages persisted for a long time due to the low productivity characteristic of a socialist state without competition, as well as recurring famines and wars. Did the Soviet government take any measures to address such living conditions? When we look at American newspaper articles from that time, we find mentions of the Soviet government's attitude toward food shortages and poverty. According to this, Soviet authorities stopped collecting statistics on poverty, claiming that poverty did not exist in the country. They clearly refused to acknowledge the harsh realities faced by their people. However, some individuals seemed to enjoy a luxurious diet. Despite nationwide food shortages, the elite ruling class in Moscow dined like royalty at the Kremlin canteen. This canteen was located within the Kremlin Palace, the political center of Moscow and the Soviet Union. It was a store where only those with special passes could access the highest quality food. There, they could purchase premium vegetables and fruits grown on exclusive farms, sausages, fish, vodka, cakes, and more. Additionally, American cigarettes and whiskey, British gin, and even rare medicines were available at a pharmacy in the canteen. While most people in the Soviet Union couldn't freely eat or drink what they wanted, the country had an unexpectedly iconic drink that took the nation by storm: cola. The turning point came in 1959. During an American product exhibition held in a park in Moscow. The exhibition was a great success, and Pepsi Cola quickly gained recognition across the Soviet Union. In 1972, Pepsi secured the exclusive rights to sell cola in the Soviet Union, becoming the first capitalist product in the country. However, what's surprising is that Pepsi did not receive monetary payment from the Soviet Union for their cola. The Soviet ruble was unstable in value and couldn't be taken outside of the Soviet Union. As a result, Pepsi accepted payment in the form of Stolichnaya vodka, which they sold in the United States instead. However, after the Soviet Union began the war in Afghanistan, a boycott movement against Soviet products emerged in the United States, and Stolichnaya vodka stopped selling. In response, Pepsi made a deal to accept 17 submarines and 3 warships as payment for their cola. And there was another surprising soft drink: beer. In the Soviet Union, beer was not classified as an alcoholic beverage but as a soft drink. When it comes to alcohol in the Soviet Union, vodka was the undisputed frontrunner. Vodka is a distilled liquor with a very high alcohol content. Compared to that, beer, with its relatively low alcohol content, might have been seen as something akin to juice. Moreover, this classification continued even after the Soviet Union collapsed. It's surprising to learn that beer was officially classified as an alcoholic beverage in Russia only in 2011. There was a famous campaign in the Soviet Union titled "Eliminate Household Trash." This campaign was launched in 1928 by the Soviet newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda. It wasn't simply a cheerful tidying up campaign aimed at creating a better lifestyle or keeping homes clean. The newspaper's message was as follows: all ornaments only create unnecessary attachment to material things. In other words, owning decorative or hobby-related items was seen as corrupting people, and the message was clear: throw them all away. All media, including newspapers, were owned by the state. They were instructed to disseminate information aligned with the government's intentions, and a strict censorship system ensured that no information opposing government policies could be published. Furthermore, the government sought to control its citizens in various ways to prevent opposition from emerging. One such policy was the construction of houses without kitchens. The reasoning was that kitchens and dining rooms were places where people gathered, and the government feared secret conversations taking place out of their sight. Even kitchens were considered dangerous as gathering spots. With this idea in mind, in the 1920s, large communal dining halls were built so that people wouldn't have to eat at home. As industrialization progressed, similar bland meals made with canned goods began to be served at dining halls across the country, making the experience increasingly unappealing. In addition to this, Soviet citizens were monitored in various aspects of their lives, and their freedoms were curtailed. One such example was music. In the Soviet Union, even listening to music was subject to state control. Western music, especially from nations hostile to the Soviet Union, and music deemed contrary to socialism or communism, was strictly prohibited. However, even under such circumstances, music lovers found ways to get creative. Driven by their desire to listen to the music they loved, they invented something unique: ribsrecords, which contained forbidden music. Ribsrecords were made using old X-ray films. In other words, people secretly obtained X-ray images, often showing someone's ribs, and used special tools to carve grooves into the films, embedding the forbidden music. Of course, the quality of these records was far from perfect. Unlike regular records, which could be played countless times if handled properly, ribsrecords could only be played around 10 times at most. These ribsrecords were created in the late 1940s by a group of young people known as stylyagi. The stylyagi were stylish youths who opposed the Soviet regime, favoring colorful, American-inspired clothing and boldly expressing their unique fashion sense. They were said to be symbols of freedom for those who resisted Soviet government restrictions. There were also other things that were strictly suppressed in the Soviet Union, one of which was male homosexuality. In 1933, under the direction of then-leader Stalin, a law was added to the criminal code that imposed a prison sentence of up to 5 years for male homosexual acts. The background to this law included reports from the Soviet secret police claiming that homosexuals were forming spy networks, Although the accuracy of these reports remains unclear, Stalin believed them and began viewing homosexuals as socially harmful individuals, leading to their persecution. This law was not repealed until 1993, even after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Its effects are still felt today, as homophobia remains deeply rooted in some former Soviet states, including Russia. In this way, the Soviet government sought to control every aspect of its citizens' lives to maintain the state. In December 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed as its last leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, resigned. The world's largest socialist state came to an end after 69 years, but part of its history has been passed down to Russia and neighboring countries, continuing in different forms to this day. The history of the world remains shrouded in mystery. Let's continue to embark on journeys together to uncover these mysteries. Until our next journey, see you again.